Hey everyone, Ashley Josephine here. So I've had a request to review how to do downward facing dog properly. So we're going to go into that today. The most common thing that I see with downward facing dog is people not doing the pose correctly because they're not in the correct alignment and position. A lot of people will do really short downward facing dogs or really too long downward facing dogs and they just feel really uncomfortable in the pose. They also look really uncomfortable in the pose. So if you're feeling uncomfortable in the pose, you might want to check out some of these alignment tips that I give you so that you can go back to your downward facing dog and see if you've been doing it right. So the first thing I want you to do is find a high plank position. You'll stack your wrists underneath your shoulders and bring your feet back and your chest slightly forward. A really easy way to figure out the right length between your hands and your feet for downward facing dog is to move into it directly from a high plank position. Now you don't have to sit here forever like I am right now. Simply from high plank, just push your hips back. You might spread out your feet a little bit. You might take the feet up slightly, but only an inch or so, nothing more than that. This is a good rule of thumb for the length of your downward facing dog. Now, it might be uncomfortable to start with if you haven't been used to doing downward facing dog in this way. So let's go into a little bit more of the alignment aspects of down dog so you can get a feeling for what you're looking for. To start with the hands, I want you to spread your fingers wide so that the pointer finger is pointing straight forward. So your hands are down on the mat, pointing straight forward, and you're pressing down on the knuckles of the pointer finger and the thumb so that the weight comes to the inside, to the middle of the body rather than to the outside of the wrist. This will help protect your wrists as you do down dog over and over and over again. From there, press the inside of the forearms together. Now they're not actually going to move, but you want to feel like you're pressing the inside of the forearms together. And when you do that, you'll feel it in your upper arms and your armpits, almost like a hollowing out of the armpit. Moving up to the bicep, imagine that your biceps are rotating outwards away from you, which is actually directly opposite of what your forearms are doing. So your forearms are pulling in towards each other and rotating inward. Your biceps are actually rotating outward. This creates a very firm and strong foundation in the armpits, which allows your arms to be a very firm and stable foundation for your downward facing dog. So let's point the fingers forward, press down through the knuckles of the pointer finger and the thumb, pull the forearms together and in towards each other, and then pull the biceps out away from each other. Again, your arms aren't really moving here, but you're imagining these motions. You feel that hollowing out of the armpits. Now let's bring the legs into it and push the hips up and back. So from this strong foundation, let's move into the shoulders. Your shoulder blades want to pull together on your back. So imagine that you're pressing a pencil between your shoulder blades. The shoulder blades are expanding out from each other and down away from the ears. Now your head is relaxing. Your gaze is up towards your belly button. So your head should be hanging, really pressing down through the arms. You should be feeling this if you're really activating all the muscles in the pose. Now find your tailbone tilting slightly upward so that your back is straight. I see a lot of rounding in the back or the tailbone comes down. The more that you tuck your tailbone up towards the ceiling, the straighter your spine gets. And as you tuck your tailbone up towards your ceiling, you might notice that your heels come up off the ground. So we want to counter that by actively pressing the heels into the ground, and you will definitely feel a stretch in your calves and maybe your hamstrings. Now, I want you to know that if you have tight hamstrings, it's totally okay to bend your knees. But when you bend your knees, you need to really make sure that you still tuck your tailbone up and you still press down through your heels. It will be harder, but you want to make sure that you're still activating those muscles so that when the time comes that your hamstrings are open enough for you to straighten your legs, you haven't been cheating out on those other muscle groups and you'll be exactly where you need to be.
Now the last thing I want you to be aware of in your downward facing dog is your core. So you don't want your belly to be soft here. You actually want to pull your belly button up and in so that your core is stabilizing the low back and supporting the body right in between the upper body and the lower body. Bring my knees down to the ground here. So if you were doing all of those different alignment pieces in downward facing dog, you'll notice that downward facing dog is an extremely difficult pose. It seems easy and we do it a lot, and we often don't stay in it for a long time in our vinyasa yoga classes. But when done right, and when those alignment practices and tips are applied to the pose, it's very exhausting, very difficult, and an incredible strength builder. So if you're ever looking to build upper body strength, or even tone up the legs, downward facing dog is a wonderful pose to do. My name is Ashley Josephine, and if you ever have any questions about yoga poses, sequences, anything yoga related, please let me know. I'd love to answer your questions. You can comment on the video below, you can send me an email, or connect with me on Facebook and Twitter. I can't wait to see you again on the mat soon. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.